Hey, welcome guys to a new session. And in the last session, we went further into developing our application. And the summary of what we did in the last session is basically we learned how to actually send out welcome emails to our users. We learned how to send out mail to users using SMTP, and we also learned to actually um, create templates that we can use to send out emails in Golang. So in this session, we'll be going further by we'll be going further by basically learning how to actually log user that are already authenticated in the application in. How do we actually do that? How do we make users that are already logged in have access to authentic endpoints that requires authentication? And that is basically what we'll plan on doing in this particular session. So to start with, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another method. I'm going to create another method, and I'm going to call the method login handler. So in the login handler, what are we expecting to do? As we have always been doing, the first thing let me fold this. Let me see, I can fold it. Okay, no problem. The first thing we are expected to do is basically to give, number one, we need to bind our data. That is basically means retrieving bind or retrieving data sent by clients. The next thing we need to do is we need to validate the data sent by clients. The third thing we need to do is we need to check if a user with supplied email exists. And the last thing we need to do is and another thing we need to do is we need to compare the client's password with the hashed password. If all goes well, we send a response with user token. Sorry about that, user token, right? So that is how we are actually going to move. So as you all know, how do we bind a data? All we need to do is just come here. Okay, the first thing we need to do is create a login user login request, and our login request is basically going to contain email and password. So let me go into the request. I will just copy this. As you all know, me being a lazy developer, login requests. So in our login request will basically contain email and password. And we'll be making sure, and we've already attached our validation to state that it is required, and the email is also required. The password as well is required. So one thing we can do is we can add additional validation to this password. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create another there is a way we can validate the length of a string. So let us go to our go validator. let's see, how do we validate string length, right? Let me see, field includes greater than, field greater than or equal to another field. This is not what we are looking for. Strings, okay. Yeah, contains, ends with, excludes, lowercase, number, numeric, ends with. We are looking for size. How do we check for length? Yes, great. No, this is not it. Uh, uh, Let me go to the documentation. I believe we will have a better insight over there. Let's go to the documentation itself, which is actually more detailed than the one here. So yeah, this is what I'm looking for, length. So for numbers, length value is equal to a parameter given. So the length must be equals to 10. That is not what we want. We want minimum. So minimum of 10. For numbers, minimum will ensure that the value is greater than or equals to the given parameter. For string, it checks the string length is at least the number of characters. So all we need to do now is copy this and come to, in fact, in our password section, I will add additional, right? You can see my code editor is even doing the autocomplete. So I'm just going to set the minimum password length to 2. Also going to come here and I'm going to set the minimum password length to 2. So let's try to register a user right now. Let's run our application. Let's restart our application. We are getting an error, missing return. Okay. That is coming from our, so I'm just going to return nil for now. I'm going to rerun the application. So let's try to pass a password less than 2 as length. What do we get? We are getting an error. Mean of undefined validation, mean of field password. Interesting. So let's see what request mean. Okay, there should be no space, I guess. So let's try to refresh again. I'm going to remove this as well. I'm going to rerun. Now let's throw, yeah, now it is working. So password field is mean. So you can see that this is another issue with Go validation. The message is not explanatory enough, and this will be very difficult for our users to really understand what this validation message is trying to say. So we are going to go another step further in the process of handling our validation messages. So I'm going to go to validation and I'm going to say case when the field under validation, sorry, this is what I want to do. So remember we did for required, we've done for email. Now I'm going to do for mean. So case when the condition being validated is minimum, how do we want the message to be printed? What I want is the error message to be, I'm going to format this error message sprint f, and I'm going to say, oh, very good. So I'm just going to tab. So the length of the string, that is, so what we are doing here is we are using the Golang sprint f to format the string. So here, the key, which is what we are trying to validate, for example, password, must be at least so character. So although what we are going to do here now is we are going to copy this and replace it here. So the key title case, just like we have password here, field must be at least. If I refresh this application now, let's see what do we get. You see, so you can see must be at least password, and that is not what we want. We want to specify the length that we actually want, right? So what I'm going to say is um uh, param. There is a way we are getting the param. Okay, so when you are using Go validator, there is a way you can actually get the param. Param is basically what you passed during the process of validation. So this two, for example, is a param. 2 here is also a param. So how do we retrieve it from the Go during the process of validation? All we need to do is say say that param is equals to validation dot param. It is going to give us the param like so. So if I replace the param here and say it must be at least, so let me refresh the application. So what do we get? So password must be at least 2. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to check if the param passed is probably something that can be converted to an integer. I'm going to change the message to state that must be at least 2 characters, because the params could be anything. So we want to make sure that what we are trying to convert is something that can be converted to an integer. Okay, so let's quickly do a check how to convert. I'll check if variable can be converted to int in Golang. So how do we do that? Uh, uh, pass int okay, is int, or I just want to check if it is digits. Unicode is digits, so we can use this Unicode is digits. This is all we need, right? I'm coming is int. Okay, there is Go validator is int, so we can use that as well. Validator is int. Via, this is the accepted. Okay, let's do this. So we are going to come into this place and we are going to say that this value, we are going to check the value, we are going to check the param, right? So if the param that is passed is an integer and error is nil, sorry, let me go back to the validation.go. If the param that is passed can be converted to an integer and the error from this atoy function is nil, we can then format our message like this. So we are going to say error print format must be at least the number, then characters. Otherwise, let me just use an else. Our error message will just be this guy. right here. So you can just say, for now, let me just, okay, for now, let me just leave this, right? So if it's, we will deal with other type of param later. So if we refresh our application, we press login. So you can see now we are getting password must be at least 2 characters, right? Must be at least 2 characters. But let's minimum, I'm not sure characters is the code, must be at let's see what's the correct English that we can actually use for this. Number of characters. Okay, characters is fine. Must be at least 2 characters. So it is fine. We can use it. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's go back. So if we, let's restart our application just to be sure everything is fine. If we hit it again, so now we are getting password must be at least 2 characters. Then let's go back to our auth handler. Now that we've actually updated our validation struct, our input struct, I mean request struct, we can then go ahead to do our binding. So I'm going to copy this line of code. In fact, everything here, I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste here. I'm going to copy this, remove here. I'm going to paste here. So what we are doing here is we are getting the login request. We are binding it. Now, if you notice, you will see that we already have some repetition, right? We already have some repetition in our code base. But for now, I guess we should just leave it. Let's see how it looks over the course of the application. I'm thinking we should format this guy, but that is an unnecessary, that will not be necessary, right? So now that we are binding our requests, our body to the login request struct, we are also validating. So if everything goes on here very well, we are also going to validate the request. So let's refresh our application and let us try to, let's create a request, add requests, and we are going to call it login. And our login will just be /login. So, all right. So the next thing, we have not actually registered our login handler. So we are going to go back to our routes file and we are going to register the login handler like so. Sorry. That's not copying very well. So login handler. Let's refresh. Now let's try to send a request. Okay, it should be a post request. If you send it again, we are getting not found. Oh, sorry. This should be login. And let's refresh our application again. Let's hit it. Now you can see email is required, password is required. Nicely printed for us. So I'm going to come here, select, make sure you select JSON. Then we are going to pass the first name, sorry, email that we want to log in with. Let's say I'll just call it a random email for now. So this is picking it up for us. Then we have the password. I'm going to set it as password. If I try to log in now, what do we get? We are not getting anything. But let me try to, okay, I understand why we are not getting anything. If I try to pass this, now you can see password must be at least 2 characters, right? Let me put a space. What do we get? Okay, very good. So it still works. So I'm going to change this back to password. I'm going to go back to the login and learn. So now that we are passing validation, we need to now check if the supplied user email actually exists, right? So now, just like we did during the process of registration, we need the user service. So what I'm going to do now is I will think of a better way for us to not be repeating ourselves. Okay, so now that we have our user service nicely declared, we can then check if if a user with that email exists. So I'm going to copy that and paste here. So based on our payload, we are passing in the email. Now, if the message is record not found, now we actually need the user retrieved. I'm going to call it user retrieved. And I'm going to print the user retrieved, right? This spelling is wrong. User retrieved, that's the correct spelling. So now that we have that, so this in this section, we will not want to send email has already been taken. What we want to send is invalid email, invalid email or password, because we don't want it that the reason why I'm sending a valid email or password is we don't want a user trying to break our system to actually know that it is the email that does not exist. So we are just going to send a message to state that email or password is invalid email or password. Or we can even say invalid credential. You can use anyone that you actually like, depending on your mode of development or how you actually want to send out or the message you want to send to user. So now let's refresh our application. Let's see what we are getting. Now I'm going to try to hit the endpoint. Now you can see we are getting invalid credentials. And let's check our database. Don't we have a user with that email? Let's check our database. We have t10 at gmail.com. t10 at gmail.com. So, all right. So the reason why this is still throwing invalid credential is because the error type that is being thrown is not false, right? The error type that is being thrown is not false. So it is that is the error type that is being thrown is not error GoRM record not found. So this is actually returning true. So that means we just need to do this. So if the error type is record not found, then we say invalid. Okay, hold on. So if error is type error record not found, yeah, that is when we want to send invalid credentials. So this is correct. So let's refresh our application and hit the endpoint again. Now you can see we are getting a pointer to the user printed. So we can dereference it to get the actual user, like so. If I refresh the application, okay, illegal types operand print. Okay, let me say fmt.print line. Let's see if that will work. All right. So if we send again, now you can see that the user credential is nicely printed for us. We are getting the email, we are getting the password. The reason why these ones are the first name and last name are showing memory location is because by defining our model, we actually used asterisk, and that is because we actually want the first name and last name field optional. So now what is the next thing? The next thing for us is to actually compare the password that is being sent from the client with the hashed password we have saved in our database, right? So I'm going to say, remember that we've actually created a way to compare password right here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to update this. I'm going to change it to compare password hash, and I'm going to call this plain password. I'm going to call this hashed password. So it is much more explanatory. So I'm going to replace this with this, and I'm going to replace this with that. So okay, so now let's go back to our auth handler, and I'm going to say if common dot compare password, the plain password will be the password that is passed to us in the payload. Payload dot password compared to the user retrieved password. Now, if this will return an error if the password comparison. Okay, wait, let's see, are we getting an error? Okay, we are getting a true or false. This is already returning an error. So if the error is nil, we are going to get a true or false. So all we need to do now is check if it is actually false. So if it is false, then that means the supplied email, the supplied password is wrong, and we are still going to return the same error, basically saying invalid credential. So that way, the user will not be able to figure out either the email does not exist or the password does not exist. And this is basically for security purposes, right? So that we won't have hackers trying to check which email is already in our system and trying to, because if you are telling them the email does not exist, they will keep trying the same password. But if you are just sending invalid credentials, and all, it will be quite difficult for the hacker to know if the email they are trying is what is invalid or not. So now let's move on. So if we try to refresh our application now, okay, sorry. If we try to refresh our application now, and we go to our Postman documentation, now the reason why we are not getting error is because the password is correct. If I change the password to 1234 and we hit the endpoint again, now you can see we are getting a success false and a message stating that the credential supplied is invalid. Now that we have actually compared, we have checked if the email exists, we have compared if the past password is equals to the hashed password. The next thing for us to do is to now generate an access token for the user, and also uh, send a response of the user detail. So let's return the user first off. Let's just return some success message. Common dot send success response, and I'm going to pass in the C context like so. I'm going to send the user retrieved. So let's try to refresh again. Let's log in. Now let me input the correct password and log in. Now you can see we are getting the user data, but we also need to generate an access token for the user. Now, how do we actually generate JWT token in our application? So in order to generate JWT token, there is a Golang package we can use called Golang JWT. Golang JWT. And I'm going to go into the package. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check how do we install it. Let's see, how do we install it? It's not showing mentioned here. I think we will see that in the Google Docs. Okay, so this is how we install it. You copy this, and we are going to head to our terminal. I'm just going to I'm going to head to our terminal, then paste. So we are trying to install the package that we are using for JWT. Now that we have installed the package, we need a way to actually we need a method to generate the JWT. Let us go to the common. Under common, I'm going to create another folder and I'm going to call it JWT. So this will basically contain anything regarding the process of generating on JWT in our application. So the first method I'm going to create is I'm going to create a method and call it, this method will have no receiver, and I'm going to call it generate JWT. Thank you, my code editor, for making my life easy. So in the process of generating a JWT, it's either we are sending uh, we are going to be sending a string, and I'm also going to send another string, which is going to be like the refresh token. So I'm going to return. I'm just going to return. I'm going to return. Oh, let's make this a pointer. Let's make this a pointer. Let's also make this a pointer. So that way we can actually return nil. Return nil. So for now, I'm going to return nil. Now, how do we generate a JWT? The first thing we need to do is we need to create a struct that will contain, we'll call it JWT claims, that will basically contain all the properties in our JWT, that are all the properties of our JWT token. So let's create a struct, type struct, and I'm going to call it custom JWT claims. So the custom JWT claims is going to contain the ID of the user, uint, and in a JSON, rightly formatted in JSON as ID, and it's also going to contain the JWT dot registered claims. The registered claims basically contains the issuer, the subject, the audience, expires as, not before, issued at, and ID. So it already contains the ID itself. So we can, okay, this is a string, and that is why I will be I am defining another one right here so that it can replace the credential that is actually associated, that is the ID that is associated with this registered claims. And that's why we are even creating a custom JWT claim. So the user claims, so the first thing we need to do is so for this, I will not be accepting the username. I will be accepting the user model itself. User model, an instance of the model, user model. So I'm not accepting pointer here because I don't want ever want the user model to be nil. I don't want a nil. So that's why I'm not accepting pointer. So let's create the user claims. And the user claims, as you know, ID will be the user supply dot ID, and the registered claims parts, registered claims will be JWT.registered claims. Will be passing in the issued at when it was actually issued, right? And that will be JWT.numeric dates time dot now. And we also passing the expires at, which is numeric date time dot now. So by default, we are setting the expired at to 1 hour, but we can increase it. Let us increase it for increment's sake. Let me just say times 100. So that will basically means this expires at will not expire for at least 100 hours. So although for For security's sake, your JWT should not stay for this long, right? But due to for educational sake, I'm just going to leave it like this. So, and that is all for the user claims. The next thing now is we need to actually generate a token based on that user claims. And how we do that is basically saying access token equals to JWT new, this function provided by us by JWT itself, and the signing method that we actually want to use, and the claims itself. So that will give us the access token. But that will generate an access token for us, but we still need to actually sign it. So the signed access token will basically be access token that you generated, sign it, and get the secret. We need to sign it with a secret access token, like a random token, just to more like you can call it encryption, right? You can call it encryption. So I'm just going to go online now and I'm going to generate random random alpha numeric numeric string. So let's go in here and I'm just going to generate. Okay, that's small. Let me say 12. Let's do that. Okay, that's even still small. Let me just say 24. Let's generate. So I'm going to use this as our access token. So I'm going to call it JWT secret. Now we are going to go to our env file and update it with the JWT secret that we've generated right here. Copy. This string can be anything, can be anything, does not necessarily have to be in this format. So we are going to go back to our JWT secret and we are going to check if there is an error. If there is an error, we are returning nil nil for the signed access token and refreshed access token. But if there are no error, what we are going to do now is then also remember I said I want to generate a refreshed token as well. So I'm going to generate signed refresh access token like so. So JWT unique claims, signing method, then the custom claim. So this one, so let's update our custom claim for this one. We don't need to add the ID here since it's a refresh token. So right, I don't think we need to do that. So what we need to do is just these two, add these two like so. So now we can then send the signed access token and we can also send the signed refresh access token. Okay, this JWT we are generating, so this will just be, sorry, this will just be a refresh token. Then the signed one will be something like this. Coming. New refresh. Okay, hey, this is not what I want. Let me Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. So what we want is refresh token, and this is not, we want new refresh. What is the correct new fresh? I'm not sure. That would be it is correct, of course. What we did before is actually correct. Let me just say that would be refresh token with the user claims. that won't just be the user claims. What we'll be sending is, let's go to the documentation, refresh token. Let's see, how do we generate a refresh token? Usage. So, okay. I think we need to go to the package itself. That is where the nice stores. Registered claim signing method. Okay. Okay. So let's leave it. This will work, but we can't pass in the user ID in a refresh token. Is as good as saying we are actually uh, generating an access token as well, right? So that's why it does not make any sense. So I'm just going to put this in like so, and we are going to sign the refresh token just like we actually signed on the access token as well. So I'm just going to do that, signed refresh token. We are going to sign it using the JWT secrets as well. If there is any error, we are going to return the error. So we are now sending the signed access token and signed refresh token. Okay, let's pass this right, because it can actually be null, right? So refresh token, that's refresh token, sorry. So what we've done is we've created a claim that will contain the user ID, when it was issued and when it will expire. We've also generated an access token and signed it. We've generated a refresh token without passing the user password in the process of generating our custom claim. And we've signed it, and we are checking if there's any error. We are returning an error, and this we are returning the generated JWT. But before we move on, there is no point generating a JWT if you cannot pass it to be sure that it is actually correct. But before we do that other part, this is getting long. Let's continue. So in order to pass the access token that is actually sent, we need to create another function. Does not need. So we are going to say pass JWT. Right. Don't need that. And in order to pass the JWT, we are going to say, so how do we pass it? All we need to do is say all we need is to call the function from JWT as well. We are going to say passed access passed JWT access token, like so. So we are going to try to pass it using the claims that was actually sent to us, right? Using the access token that is sent to us, this access token, or we can call it JWT depending on you, or let me call it signed. It's actually the signed access token. So using the signed access token, we are going to pass it in the JWT. You can see the token string, the claims, right? And the claim here will be what we are expecting to be in the claim, and we are then going to, based on what is actually passed, JWT secret that we are using to actually validate or to pass that access token using the JWT secret that we used to actually sign it. So this will return an interface or an error and bytes. Let's check the document pass with claims. So if you can see, this all your base is basically the secret token. This is actually expecting null, right? Once it has been passed, we can check if there is any error. As you can see here, I'm going to copy this and paste. So I want to check if there is any error. Let's import log. Okay. Then the token, this is the past access token. We are going to your custom token like so. A custom token. So this will be passed. And also the claims. So these claims is basically maybe like claims.id, something like that. Or right. So if we get to this stage, then that means our claim is actually all right? So what we are going to do now is, if there is no error, we are going to return the claims and a nil to actually state that there are no errors. So what I'm going to do now is, for this one, I'm just going to return error. Let's return error. Let's log info. Let's log error. Just log error. And also we are going to log error. We don't want to break our application just because of that. And we are going to return an error stating this one. Our error will be errors dot new. So on unknown claim type and cannot proceed. That's what we are going to print right here. And we are going to remove that. So I think we should be good now. So we are returning here if there's any error. So we are good. Now, the next thing we want to do is, let me rename to JWT access token. Say signed access token. So now that we are passing the access token, we also need another function to actually check if the past access token has expired. So let's leave that for now. When we are checking for authenticated user, we are going to create that function. So I'm going to go back to the auth handler, and I'm going to generate an access token for the user, access token, and it's going to be common dot generate JWT. We are going to pass the user model, the user retrieved, and we are also, let's see how many user model. So access token, the refresh token, and error. Those are the things we are expecting, right? Unresolved variable. Okay. So if error is nil, is not nil, then we are going to send the error. Otherwise, we are just going to send the user detail with the necessary assets token. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a map with an interface, and I'm going to call this access token, refresh token, and the user ID retrieved user dot ID. Well, let's just attach the user itself, user. And I'm going to rename this to access token, and I'm going to call this refresh token, right? So now that we've actually done that, this should be token. Thank you. Now that we've actually done that, let's go back and refresh our application. Now that everything looks all right, if we send this in, now very good. You can see we are getting a nice access token and we are getting a refresh token. Let's go to the JWT webpage. Let's see what is in our token, jwt.io, CG. Okay, no. Think what we are looking for. Yeah, so let's paste this in. So you can see the ID of the user, the expired ads, and all, and the algorithm that we are actually using. So right. So now that our access token is being passed appropriately, and we are generating an access token to the login user, that is how basically we log in a user, and we generate an access token for them to be able to log in into our application. So in the next section, we are going to introduce um, accessing authenticated routes in our application using the JWT token we have actually created. So stick with me and let's move on to the next session. Don't remember to like, subscribe, share with your friends, and please subscribe and like. These are part of the things that actually keeps me going, gives me more reason to keep creating great content like this. Thank you.